Hi, this is Laurie. I wanted to talk about our first reading this week using information as evidence. And I wanted to look at the three examples that we have down here and talk about how we can use different kinds of evidence and also check out the credibility of some of these websites. The first website that we'll look at is the American Psychological Association. Inmate Drug Abuse Treatment Slows Prison's Revolving Door. And this is a summary of a study that was done by the American Psychological Association. And what they're doing is they're citing research by different professionals in the field. So they've got a study up there, they're citing a study down here as well. And this would be a great piece of evidence to bring in if I was trying to look at the idea of recidivism or the idea of people coming back into prison. And are there things that are being done that can help slow that down? So they're saying in this one, a combined sample of 1,461 inmates from a few states who took part in a intensive drug treatment program and aftercare ended back in prison, compared with about 3/4 of those who received no treatment. So that would be a really strong piece of evidence that I could bring in to support my research about recidivism and things that can be done to stop it. And this is from the American Psychological Association. They are a group that is out to support psychologists who are working in the field. If I go to the About APA page, I can see some information about this organization, who they are, who staffs it, if they're credible or not, and they go through and tell us a little bit about their organization here. I can go see their ethics code, and I can see the work they do, their plan, and I can even come in and see their staff. So that's a really good way for me to judge the credibility of an organization, is using their About page or About Us page. The next item that we'll look at in our list is a PDF of an article from a magazine called Corrections Today, and I saved this from ProQuest. And Corrections Today is a magazine that's written for professionals who actually work in the field of corrections. So it is a very credible source, and what they're doing in this article is they're looking at faith-based programs as a way to reduce recidivism. And what they do in this article is they look through and they talk about examples of projects or programs that have been done in actual correctional facilities and whether they worked or not. So in this particular one, they're looking at some analysis that was done by University of Pennsylvania that covered 46 religious programs and concluded that research on religious practices indicate that higher levels of religious involvement are associated with lower rates of delinquency. So that's looking at another bit of research. I can also come down here and they're going to talk about specific programs that were enacted by the Virginia Department of Corrections. So I could bring these in as evidence of programs that were working to help reduce recidivism through faith-based programs. And then furthermore, they come down and they look at success stories of individual inmates. So these are all outlined on our reading about using information as evidence. I can bring in all kinds of information. I can bring in research studies, statistics, success stories of individuals, examples of projects or programs in the field. I'm not limited really a whole lot by the types of information that I can bring in. I just want to make sure that it's credible and being reported by a credible person who's in the field. So if I continue coming down to the bottom of this article, they have some endnotes in here which list the sources that they've used to compile this article, and they also tell me about the author. He is a volunteer manager for the Virginia Department of Corrections, so it's somebody who's actually working in the field and really knows their stuff and can accurately report on what's going on with the Virginia Department of Corrections. So that establishes a lot of credibility for this. The third item in our list is a newspaper article from the Carolina Reporter. And I'm not here to say that newspapers are terrible, don't ever use them, but they just present information differently than those other two more professional sources that we looked at. So newspapers are in the business to educate the general public about what's going on in the news. In this one, they interview a particular prisoner, William Davis Harrison, who left prison in September of 2004, and they go through and they talk about his ability to stay out of prison and be rehabilitated. And they come through here and they list some statistics and some information and some dollar amounts, but they're really not listing the sources of their statistics. They list a department spokesman down here, and that's pretty good. But a lot of these sources don't really have, these sources of information don't list where they got them. And they go through and they do a very nice profile of this particular inmate, and they talk about his story. But it's not really as solid evidence as those other two pieces that we saw. The first one from the American Psychological Association, or the second one from the professional magazine Corrections Today. And our last source that we're going to look at today is a debate site called debate.org. It looks very professional. They ask some really good questions. For example, prisons should focus on rehabilitating criminals. And what happens is there's a polling period and people debate in various rounds, and they bring in information and try to argue their particular point of view. Sometimes people bring in some pretty good information. They talk about a decrease in crime by 25%. But I can't tell anything about these people. All I can see is that this person's name is Gondon. I know nothing about them and if they're qualified, and often people don't provide the statistics and the sources of their statistics. So sites like this, debate.org, you have to be careful and try to figure out who is this, who's saying this. Is it a professional in the field or not? So I'd like to suggest that you stay away from things like this as actual sources that you would hand in. It's a great place to look for some ideas, but these would not be acceptable as a credible, solid source of information. I hope this helps. Please let me know if you have any questions.